Welcome to the Now and Then podcast. I'm your host, Dan McCool. Join us as we dive into the fascinating journeys of professionals across the globe who have dedicated 15 or more years to their careers. Come along as we explore how their roles have evolved, the challenges they've faced, and the wisdom they've gained along the way. I can't wait for you to hear their insights. Let's uncover the stories behind the experiences of these remarkable professionals. Welcome to the Now and Then podcast. Today we continue our discussion with part two of with Ron Gaston, who's a pastor for many years, who was able to go on and add on to that career as a corporate executive in the restaurant world while continuing his ministry. Welcome back, Ron. Okay, yeah, well, it's a long journey, no doubt about that. And the one thing I did want to ask you is, how is the culture of? Do you think the culture of the church has changed over the years? And if so, how so?
Well, I think the biggest culture of the change really, I think, started in the 60s through the 80s. I think was a big momentum swing. Because we came out of the hippie free love era, and people with drugs and all that still became very empty. And there was sort of a falling away from traditional church.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, after the free love movement and LSD and smoking weed, people were still on a search for identity inward, and they were on a religious search. There was a lot of negativity between traditional value churches such as Catholicism and Presbyterianism and these kind of major American church movements. So the Pentecostal movement was too rigid. It was too strict. It was too, quote, old fashioned. So there was a great falling away with all these groups. In the mid 80s, you had the New Wave Church, which was the community church, the buzzword. So,
Right.
well, what are you? Well, we're a Christian community church. We're not Pentecostal. We're not Baptist. We're not Methodist. So there was a big new wave, and there was a huge attraction in the 80s and the 90s to gravitate to just say, hey, I'm a Christian, and leave all the negativism that was associated with these traditional groups. And the church grew really big across the country. Now, what most people didn't know behind the new faith or the new Christian movement, the New Wave Church, the community church, the Church of the Hope, the Church of Community, Foursquare, they were all Pentecostal based churches. The doctrine of those churches was very Pentecostal. The difference was in how it was perceived and how it was administered to people. And it allowed people to come in and think, oh, I'm a good Christian, but I'm not Pentecostal. Yeah, but the doctrine is Pentecostal. The difference is, you're not jumping around, falling out, you know what I mean? And you know what I'm saying? It was a
Sure.
very subtle, and it actually grew very large. And then it sort of started to kind of mellow out, and then you had the televangelists come in, and then the next wave was, become a Christian and get rich in 90 days.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah, so people began to, I think, subvert the true meaning of the gospel to prosperity ministry. Became
Mm-hmm.
very big, where churches grew huge numbers of people looking for prosperity, and it's unfortunate, um, because that was never a message of Christ.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that whole thing. I thought that for a while there, especially with the big churches like you're talking about,
Yes.
the mega churches, it was a cult of personality.
Yes.
and almost every one of them got caught up in some sort of scandal. Whether it was politics or money or sex or drugs or whatever. They weren't immune from any of that.
No, they weren't. And again, it goes back to the principle and authority of God and the limitations of man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
it became like I say, it was that cult of personality, and that just
exactly.
seems like a huge wrong turn there.
Oh, it definitely is. And you know, I've been a part of all of that. And not so much in the sense of of looking for prosperity ministry, but in my course of being an assistant pastor in different states and different churches, how much I had to be aware of the direction of that particular individual church, where it was going, and to make sure that I had an influence, that it was on a straight and narrow. Not that it's perfect, but that the goal and the intent was a righteous one. And, I always had trouble with the prosperity ministries, these mega churches. Not that being mega is bad, but it is all about how you attain it and what's the goal. And I always thought it was ironic that you could have any pastor, any person worth millions, and people that live right around the block from the church are struggling to buy groceries. I
Right.
never saw how that fit into the ministry of the disciples and the ministry of the church. And
Mm-hmm.
not everyone is, most people, I will venture to say, have no real understanding of prosperity in the sense of financial wealth.
Mm-hmm.
It has caused more problems than just being poor.
Mm-hmm.
And and if people think life is better because they prosper, uh, there's many things that will prosper you other than money.
Right.
You
And
know,
there,
yeah.
yeah, there have been studies done that say, people talk about if money can buy you happiness or not. Well, the study was done that actually money can buy you happiness up to a certain point. And the study showed that up to an income of about, this is a few years ago now, but if you were making 70,000 a year, that would make you happy. But anything over 70,000 a year did not make you more happy. In fact, it was likely to make you less happy because you had more worries about protecting that money, about worried about somebody trying to get your money or trick you out of it and that sort of thing. So yeah, a certain level of financial security is a wonderful thing, but at the level that some of these guys have attained with their mega churches, that's just ridiculous. It's
And,
not
and
making anybody happy,
no, and it is. See, this is one thing that I find as a Bible scholar per se.
Hmm.
The Bible clearly outlines that. In the book of Matthew, Jesus is giving a talk or sermonette, and he says something very simple. He says this. He says, "Don't build your treasures on earth where the moth and the elements corrode it, but
Wow.
build treasures in heaven where there's neither moth nor do thieves break through and steal." And what he was talking about is the value of Christianity is your heart. And we have these other sayings in society that we don't make religious. It's like, you've heard it. Oh, well, you can't take it with you,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
it's a biblical principle that the only thing that we carry from this life to the next life is our relationship with our Heavenly Father. That is the value, that is the wealth of life. And yeah, you can get money and you can do a whole bunch of stuff with it, but you and I know, we read it every day. How many of the famous people in Hollywood are drug addicts because they're unhappy? How many
Right.
people that are celebrities kill themselves because guess what? They have all the money in the world. But what happens? They're not happy. So
Right.
what do? They self-medicate. They get the drugs. They get instant gratification because they have no relationship with the Heavenly Father, who is the author of life, the creator of life. And so they have an empty life
Mm-hmm.
and they can't travel the world. They can't give because they're void inside and they're
Hmm.
unhappy. So what do? They drug out or
Mm-hmm.
they kill themselves. And it happens every day among the rich and famous, the people that we adore because they're so famous and have so much to
Right.
live for. They're the ones who go early.
Right. And I think that's one of the tragedies of this country. In fact, is that we have grown so uh, almost what's the word I'm looking for? We've almost come to worship celebrity. That's probably not the right word to use in this context, but it seems that it is approaching that level, where we worship celebrity for all the wrong reasons, because they have
All
money or because they have some sort of superficial talent, or whatever. They gain our attention for all the wrong reasons, and that really bothers me. They're talking us into buying all sorts of stuff that we don't want or need, and
yeah.
it's just it's a real tragedy of American life, in my opinion.
Well, see, that's the whole idea of sort of a religious pursuit, which is a spiritual one, and then a earthly desire, which is a natural one. And the Bible is clear that in those two realms there is conflict. They will never meet. The spiritual man seeking the higher things in life, like love, kindness, sanctity, morality, they will never meet with the carnal man, the earthly man, whose desire is wealth, power, authority, gluttony, you name it. All these, and that's why they'll never meet. And that's the whole challenge between bridging your spiritual walk and your earthly walk or carnal walk. There will
Mm-hmm.
always be a conflict. And the challenge that is upon us all is to recognize that conflict and then choose which one becomes a priority in our life. Is the priority in life attaining whatever, or is the priority in life becoming God's vessel to help mankind? Paul says in Romans that God saves us to save others. He doesn't save us just for ourselves. He saves us so that we can be a witness to help save others. Because as a person of faith, we know this is not the only world. This is the world, but not the world to come.
Mm-hmm.
So, I, I've been fortunate to do a lot of things. I'm not a wealthy person at all, but the greatest the greatest gift that I feel that I received from my parents, it was nothing to do with a dollar.
Hmm.
They were, we grew up in Oxnard, Wyoming. We
Yeah,
had working everyday parents. You know what I
that's
mean?
right. Everybody did.
Yeah, right. So it ain't like we came up in Parkway, Calabasas, right, and Westwood.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
what is the value of the morality that my dad gave me? The
Hmm.
How much money is it worth, that work ethic that he instilled in me, the idea of doing the right thing, of being honest, of being morally upright? What is the value of that? How much money is that worth today?
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Well, I think we're finally coming to the realization. We're starting to come a little bit first full circle from the 80s when it was all about, personal success and all that, to a more spiritual sort of a time. Um, and you're seeing that, I think, in a lot of different realms. I don't want to get too deep into the politics of it, but
Yeah,
even
sure.
right now, people are tired of the old hate and fear mongering, and they're looking towards uh, more hope and a caring, more brighter personal future, and away from that cult of personality, which I am thrilled about.
I just say we have to keep it moving.
Hmm.
We have to keep it moving. And it's, you know, from a spiritual perspective, being that that's part of our talk today,
Hmm.
it's always at the forefront, however people want to look at it.
Hmm.
Being compassionate, bringing people together, isn't that part of the spiritual connection of God and man, and brotherly love
Absolutely.
versus the me
Hmm.
and what I, I, uh, there's nothing spiritual in that.
Yeah,
And
and
you have to make a decision of what best represents the future brotherly connection, because it's going to be a challenge anyway.
right.
But would you rather have the challenge of people trying to connect, trying to build bridge? Dan, you and I came up in the 60s. Martin Luther King was assassinated. Civil rights were at stake.
Hmm.
2,500 students in our high school, uh, 13 blacks, 6 blacks in our senior class
Right.
out of 525.
Right.
What did we do as young people? Whether our parents weren't as open as we were, we didn't deal with that. We were fun. We were
Right.
bridging gaps. We wanted to have fun. We valued the groups of people that we associated with. It wasn't even about color, man. It was about how much
No.
fun we were having, what connections and exciting things. Where is that today?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And I can reach out to you, and I haven't seen you in 30 years or longer, and here we are, like just like we were fishing together yesterday.
Oh yeah, and it's
Yeah.
funny because my kids, uh, they got me on Facebook a few years ago, which I just didn't want to do. And I
Hmm.
said, "Hey, you guys won't send me any pictures of my grandkids. I'm getting upset about that." They said, "Dad, we don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
We post pictures online, okay? You
Hmm.
got to go to Facebook." So that's how I got on Facebook.
Yeah, we're still growing, aren't we? Yeah.
Yeah, I got on Facebook so I could see pictures of my grandkids. So the
Right.
next thing you know, it's like, "Oh, do you know so and so?
Right.
Do you
Right.
know Jane Gokovich?"
Yeah. Right. Right.
you know,
Yeah.
uh,
And
it,
then I'm getting a message from Aaron Looney.
yeah, exactly right. So, 3,000 friends later,
Yeah.
here we are. But, and it's funny because I, in the course of all of our Viking friends, I still tell them, Vikings rule, and
Hmm. Yeah.
Viking birthdays. But it is really it's really cool. And
Hmm.
I was just sending well wishes to Joan Patton the other day, who lost
Hmm.
a family member, and Ed Hart, and,
Hmm.
Aaron Looney. It it's just it's
Yeah.
pretty cool. It's
It's
pretty
pretty
cool.
fun. Yeah. Well, I've got a couple more questions here I want to ask you before we
Sure,
wrap this up, Ron.
sure.
Um, I was just wondering how your personal goals and motivations have changed and shifted throughout your career as a pastor.
Uh, you know, it's a long trek, and as I kind of mentioned earlier, it's a life of sacrifice.
Hmm.
Even today, my wife, she'll say things like, "Why are you so concerned about this person?" Oh, you can't get away from that part of it. That
Hmm.
if God instills you a ministry of help and support of others, it never goes away.
Hmm.
you know. So that's sort of been the overwhelming course of my life.
Hmm.
Um, Go back and ask me that question again because I wanted to.
Sure. I just was wondering how your personal goals and motivations have shifted.
Yeah. So I guess having children, the my goal shifted from what I could do for others to what do I need to do to get them to do what I'm doing.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I think as my kids started growing up, my goal became less of being concerned about my past, but how could I influence their path, and
Okay. Yeah.
how can I make that path for them something that they want to do willingly, not because dad's a pastor, but how do I integrate with the message that they pursue a godly life and yet attain other things that they would like to do in this life, and that the two can be blended together as what happened to me. I
Hmm.
started off in the ministry. I needed to support my family, and God and opened the door for me to hold senior executive positions in several major fast food category, categories. Um, I was director of operations, the first black in Sonic Drive-ins. I was first black regional director in Domino's Pizza on the West Coast. I mean, I achieved some miraculous things, and I think it was because I put God's work first that He
Okay.
opened the door for me to make it in a different venue, and the two could work together. And so for me, that was great. So, how do I get my kids to see that vision? How do I get them
Hmm.
to have a rooted foundation in their Christian belief? And then, how do they integrate that to help others and then build their career that they would like to do, you know?
Hmm.
And they don't have to be in conflict,
Right.
with each other.
Yeah, I think that's a great message too. That the spiritual and the secular do not have to be in conflict; they can coexist and actually support each other and go hand in hand.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's a great message. Absolutely, Ron.
Hey, you
Yeah,
just
and
said, I'm sorry.
yeah,
You just,
and I think one of the great things about that too is you can lead by example. It's not just what you say; it's what you do, and you have not only talked the talk, but you've walked the walk. And our kids see that. They understand that we're just not out there, spouting off a lot of theory, but we're putting it into practice every day. So Were you being a pastor during COVID?
Yes.
Okay, if you would like to talk a little bit about how that affected your ministry.
Oh, it was a real big challenge because part of the success of church in terms of people is them face to face, getting support, seeing, kind of like a social club in a way, because you see the same people. You look forward to seeing them Sunday to Sunday. You want to follow up on their family, their kids, and what's happening in their lives. COVID affected that dramatically. And
Mm-hmm.
there was a big falling away, and it really affected pastors emotionally. Um, Technology came in, people broadcasting and Zoom, but it was
Mm-hmm.
not the same. I had one of my good pastor friends. He was really on the verge of a mental collapse because he couldn't speak into the camera like you and I are talking. He was too
Mm-hmm.
used to seeing people and
Mm-hmm.
getting their reactions to the comments in his messages. So
Mm-hmm.
it had a profound effect. We did have outlier churches within different communities that said, hey, we're defying the meeting order and they're going to meet. Okay. And churches did that. I kind of didn't like that personally, but I didn't do anything to try to intervene. I followed our directive, and our particular church and supporting churches decided not to meet. We valued what the government asked, and we valued the life of other people because we thought it would be devastating if people within the congregation started spreading it and people died.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
we did manage it. I also think that a lot of churches that did not had a financial reason for doing that.
Ah.
Um, that was very much a part of COVID because a lot of churches giving um, and supporting the church oftentimes comes with a little force feeding, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
you're not able to force feed, people when you have them in front of you,
All
then
right.
you know them looking at a TV screen, please give. It's like okay,
Right.
I'll do it. So a little bit less pressure. So a lot of churches had significant financial shortcomings because of COVID. So it definitely had a devastating effect.
Wow. Yeah. Now I'm hearing that from a lot of people. You know how it basically will almost put them out of business. You know.
Oh, it did. A lot of those smaller churches, uh,
Yeah.
it definitely did because, like I said, America's churches are small. They're not the mega church. They're the small guys who have, two or 300 members, and they're trying to live and operate a church
Right.
with a very limited income. And man, people can't come. A lot of those people were financially impacted as well by
Right.
COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So discretionary income and giving income was way down. So it had
Right.
definitely an effect on a lot of churches, and some of them never came back.
Right, and I'm sure it probably had a lot of effect upon the congregants as well. You know,
Oh
they
yeah.
get used to having that support group right there, and all of a sudden that's has a diminished impact as well. They're not able to reach out and take part in that community anymore.
And it was interesting too because our church had conceded and stopped meeting. We were on ABC broadcast channel in Sacramento.
Mm-hmm.
A year after COVID, I wasn't even going to church because I got so used to watching the podcast. I didn't have
Uh-huh.
I didn't have to get dressed. I just sit up in the bed and flip on channel 13.
Yeah,
So so
I
it
didn't even think
definitely
about that.
affected me,
Yeah,
to where it was convenient to just stay home and not go out. So I think
sure.
that happened to a lot of people.
Huh. Interesting. Yeah. So the next question I have is, what one single piece of advice would you give to somebody starting out in the ministry today if they wanted to be a church leader?
Oh, well, the first thing is to make sure that you have heard and clarified the voice of God.
Okay.
That's extremely important. That you're not driven by personal desires,
Mm-hmm.
that you're driven by a godly order. And then, secondly, I think it's critical to understand that it is a life of commitment, and you need to evaluate if you can or if you're willing to make a life commitment. And if you feel that you've heard from God and you've taken introspective of your life and you know that you're committed, then that will take you all the way to the end.
Mm-hmm. Well, that seems like a really good piece of advice. It's like do that deep dive into your soul and find out if this is really where you want to go. It's yeah. Well, good for you, Ron. It sounds like you have done that. And
Yeah.
I just have one final question here for you, and I think I kind of know the answer up to it, but I'm going to ask it anyway because I want to hear you say it. If you had it to do all over again, would you?
Oh, yeah. I'd even be better at it.
Good. Yeah, I like to hear that. Yeah.
Yeah, I would do it. I would do it all over again, and I would take a higher level of commitment.
Right on. Well, good for you. It seems like you're really happy with the way things have worked out in your ministry and also in your other professional life as a corporate executive. That's really great to hear. So far I've been so lucky with the guests I've had on this show. Every one of them has had a career that they have enjoyed and would recommend to others and would do all over again. So. You're truly blessed to have done that, and I congratulate you, Ron.
Oh, thank you. And I have your phone number, Dan. So you can believe, man, you're gonna have to take me on that Columbia Chinook
Okay,
trip.
I'll try to line something up here. I'll start talking to my people and see if we can get something lined up to go fishing. That would be
Oh, I love
a
that.
blast.
I
Yeah,
love
yeah.
that.
Well, Ron, I want to thank you today for being a guest on Now and Then. It's been a real honor and a privilege to have you as my guest today.
Thank you.
And well, I look forward to taking you fishing up here before
Oh,
too long.
wait.
We'll have some fun, buddy.
All righty.
Bye now. Take care.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Now and Then podcast. If so, then subscribe, like, follow, throw money, do whatever it is that you do to show support. We really appreciate it. Stay curious and carpe diem.